should be pretty straightforward for folks because we're talking about reinforcement and extinction and using them concurrently. Okay, so without further ado, are we going to do lights on, lights off? What do you people want?
On.
All right.
On? Okay.
Yeah, I like the kaching.
Well, this is totally different. All right, differential reinforcement. This is what it is. It's a procedure. We're going to reinforce one set of responses and put another set of responses on extinction. Differential reinforcement. Reinforce one set of responses, put another set of responses on extinction. There's a little subtlety in that definition, so I'll make the subtlety concrete and apparent. It has the word set of responses. Miller uses one behavior. The reason the language is slightly different is whenever you perform a behavior, an act, make a response, that response is never identical to the previous one, even though it sort of looks the same. When you write your name on a check, those people who still have checkbooks and write their name, is your writing of your name the same every time? No. That's what we're talking about. But you're still writing your name, right? So we've got a set of responses, like name writing, and then we have another set of responses. We're going to reinforce one set, put another set on extinction. This is differential reinforcement. So, how can you discriminate differential reinforcement from other things that we've been talking about and will talk about? Okay? We've got two sets of responses in differential reinforcement. One we're going to reinforce, another that we're going to put on extinction. So two sets of responses, or two responses if you want to take Miller literally. Okay? We have one situation. These two sets, these two behaviors are occurring in the same situation. We're going to reinforce one behavior, set of responses, put another set of behaviors on extinction in that same situation. Miller makes the point that we're reinforcing a different response. That's true. The difference lies in what is called the response dimension. So I've listed 4 of them. Response dimension is the physical property of a response. The physical property of a response. So we've got duration. This is how long it takes to perform the behavior. We can reinforce a behavior that's performed more quickly. That's with a shorter duration, right? We can reinforce a behavior that takes more time to perform. We can use differential reinforcement on the duration of the response. Latency. This is how long it takes for the behavior to start occurring. And we can differentially reinforce longer latencies or shorter latencies to respond. Strength or amplitude, how much force of that behavior. And we can differentially reinforce that. And topography, this is the one that most people are generally familiar with. This is the shape or the form of the behavior. If you play sports, either in intramural or you got a Saturday pickup game or something like that, if you've ever had a coach, that coach may have used differential reinforcement to reinforce good form. Because the form in which you perform an athletic act really is important. So we can do that. That's the topography. And as I said when we began this, we've got 2 principles operating together: reinforcement and extinction. And you're going to encounter examples in the book, this lesson and other lessons, where you're going to get something where something's happened and the behavior increases. If it's reinforcement, what must have occurred for us to call it reinforcement? We need an event that follows the behavior and causes that behavior to increase. If there's an event that occurs before the behavior and the behavior increases, is that reinforcement? Nope. And you'd say unknown. Because we haven't talked about that yet. That's coming up. So reinforcement and extinction, where we're stopping the reinforcer for previously reinforced behavior. Somebody loaded the cash register. Okay, so we're looking at the Skinner box, the operant chamber, from the experimental analysis of behavior. With Rudy the rat. That's whose behavior we're studying. The behavior is a lever press. So, contingent on the lever press of more than 1 inch depression of that lever, pushing it down further. That behavior is going to be reinforced with a little opportunity to sip water. Before the behavior, there is no reinforcer. There's no water. If Rudy the rat presses the lever less than 1 inch, that behavior is on extinction. 2 behaviors or 2 sets of responses in one situation. Differential reinforcement. And I would predict we're going to get a cash register. Sounds, yes. All right. What are the reinforcers for a person like me who lectures in front of students? What are the reinforcers? What are the immediate reinforcers that will maintain that lecturing behavior? Pardon?
Eye contact.
We're going to treat that as a correct answer, but do you really have your eyes contacting me? Whoever said that? No. You're sort of looking at me, aren't you? That's the best we can say is you're looking at me. I can't tell, even if I had my glasses on, I can't tell if you're really looking at me or if you're looking over here. All I can determine is that you're oriented towards me. Okay? But yeah, that's a reinforcer. You're sort of like paying attention, right? What's another reinforcer?
Asking questions.
Asking questions is a big reinforcer for a professor. What's another one? This is equally as big as a reinforcer. Pardon?
Taking notes.
Taking notes, that's reinforcing for the lecturer, for the professor, that's true. But again, are you really taking notes? This is our behavioral definition, right? If you're taking notes, you are writing down stuff that is related to what I'm talking about, right? Do I know that from observing your writing behavior? No. So the closest thing that's a reinforcer to that is you scribbling in your notepad, writing love letters, hate letters, okay, doodling. What's another reinforcer for the lecturer, the professor, lecturing? It's a big one, high magnitude. Yes?
People showing up.
Nah, not really. Yes?
You're getting paid.
That's not immediate. That's way, way far away.
Would it be like getting a good grade on the test?
And that's for you, ain't for me.
I'm just asking.
That's a good kind of a statement question. Okay? How about answering a correct question correctly? Is that a big reinforcer for a professor? It's huge. It's huge.
Obviously, we're not doing it.
Okay? So, could students use a differential reinforcement procedure on a professor? Pick your professor. The answer is sure they can. So let's look at, now that you know what the reinforcers are that are under your control. We're going to use differential reinforcement to produce lecturing on the left side of the room. That would be your left side. So when that professor lectures anywhere on the left side of the room, what are you going to do? You're going to present a reinforcer. Like, you're going to answer a question, you're going to ask a lame or good question, because question asking behavior is a reinforcer for the professor. You're going to kind of look in their direction even though you're not looking at them. You're going to write hate notes in the margin of your notepad or what have you. All those things are reinforcers for the lecture, only if it's occurring on the left side of the room. When that instructor wanders over to your right side of the room, what are you going to do? Stop presenting the reinforcer. How would you stop the reinforcer of looking at the instructor? Can a dead man not look?
Oh, that's true.
So how are you going to stop that reinforcer of looking? You can
Go to sleep.
take a quick nap, put your head down. You've just stopped presenting the reinforcer. How about answering questions? How are you going to stop that?
Just don't.
You don't. You don't answer questions, you don't ask questions, you don't look at the instructor, and you put your pencil down, you put your hands in your pocket, look around. Until the professor wanders over to your left side. And then what do? You reinforce that behavior immediately. You raise your hand, you ask a question, you look at the instructor, and you scribble in your notebook. All those reinforcers are going to increase the frequency of lecturing on the left side. Differential reinforcement.
Talk about the rule.
Yep.
So what's the point of like the extinction of the other response?
To get it to cease.
Just to get it to stop?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's look at booze, ass, and ion. This is in your book. This is a study done it's called behavioral coaching, where you use differential reinforcement to increase the athletic skills. Coaches really don't use reinforcement very much. What do they use? We haven't talked about it. You might know what it is already, though. They use yelling and screaming.
Punishment.
Punishment. They use punishment. They punish an error. If you want to improve performance, increase a behavior, whether it be shooting the basketball through the hoop, going into the right stance if you're a football player, kicking the ball through the goal if you're a soccer player, you have to reinforce the desired behavior. Punishment is not going to do it. Okay? So, what we have here is differential reinforcement for athletic skills. The coach praised skillful hits, whether it was a serve, a backhand, or a forehand. They praised skillful hits. And the frequency, strength, future likelihood of those behaviors increased. When that athlete performed a hit unskillfully, that behavior was on extinction, no praise. Skillful hits went up, unskillful hits went down in frequency, and that athlete was performing better. And you want to make a bet if that athlete was happier? Much happier. Do you think that athlete's going to be more motivated to play? Absolutely. Because they're getting positive reinforcement for success. They're not being yelled at. Raise your hand if you like to be yelled at. Huh. You must not be athletes then. Differential reinforcement. Is differential reinforcement used in counseling and psychotherapy? Of course, silly. This is a study done by Truax and Kharkov, 1966. These two guys were followers of Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers, a famous American psychologist, developed what was called client-centered counseling, where the counselor was to be non-directive. Allow the client to explore and gain insight, that aha moment. The light bulb goes on between your ears. Aha. So, Truax and Kharkov did a study. And lo and behold, these Rogerian psychotherapists were using principles of behavior. They were guiding the process. So when that client made comments about being aware of the problem, being aware of the causes, being aware of the consequences of their actions, being aware that they need to do something different, that Rogerian supportive counselor would go, uh-huh, mm-hmm. When that client complained about their problems, that complaining behavior was put on extinction. No uh-huh, no mm-hmm, and no head nod. So-called insight, awareness increased, complaining decreased, because that behavior was put on extinction. So the stuff that you're learning about is directly relevant to clinical and counseling psychology. Everything that we're talking about is. Let's talk about types. Just mentioning these. Okay, they are discussed ever so briefly at the end of the lesson. So if they're talked about at the end of the lesson, you know there's going to be questions about them. So let's talk about the three types of differential reinforcement procedures. The first one is called differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. All that means is that you're going to reinforce a behavior that is physically incompatible with the undesired behavior. That's what Truax and Kharkov did. They did differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. You can't talk about the cause of your problem, the solution to your problem, and at the same time complain about it. They're incompatible, physically incompatible. Differential reinforcement. And the complaining behavior in Truax and Kharkov was put on extinction. We reinforce a physically incompatible response, put the undesired behavior on extinction. And we've got on the slide here, talking quietly versus talking loudly. Physically incompatible. You can't do both at the same time. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. This is where we're going to reinforce a desired alternative response and put the undesired behavior on extinction. But they aren't necessarily physically incompatible. We're just going to reinforce a desired alternative. Okay, so we've got a student talks out in class and gets attention. That's the undesired behavior. That social reinforcement is powerful for talking out behavior. Now we're going to put that behavior on extinction and reinforce raising their hand. Student raised their hand, immediately called on by the instructor. That behavior is going to increase in frequency, and the talking out is going to decrease in frequency. If we can stop the reinforcer for talking out. That's the key. DRO, this is probably the more complicated one to make sense of. Okay? We're going to reinforce any desired behavior that occurs. Please put your phone down. Aren't phones supposed to be on the table, gentlemen?
We never said that.
I think it's in the syllabus.
Oh, well then I guess they are.
Phones are supposed to be on the table or in your bag, preferably on the table, and shut off. Why? If you have your phone in your hand, what are you going to do?
Use it.
Use it. And then you're not looking at me, you're not taking notes, and you're not getting the stuff you need to get. Okay, so let's go back to differential reinforcement of other behavior. Okay? Any behavior, any desired behavior that occurs at the end of an interval is going to be reinforced if the undesired behavior has not occurred in that same interval. If the undesired behavior occurs in the interval, it's on extinction. Differential reinforcement of other behavior. Okay? Any questions about differential reinforcement?
Can you re-explain DRI again?
You have two physically incompatible behaviors. And we're going to reinforce one of those behaviors and put the other behavior on extinction.
Okay.
Okay? Any other questions? All righty. And we hope that the upload will work.
We did end up putting the lesson from yesterday on there.